In May of 1816, the rain began in London and refused to stop. A massive volcanic eruption halfway across the globe blocked out the sun, plunging Europe into a weather anomaly called the Year Without Summer. The city sat beneath a ceiling of dull metal clouds, drowning in an endless, freezing downpour. For 21-year-old Harriott Shelley, the cold felt absolute. She was a mother of two, alone in her parents' house after being abandoned by her husband, the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. She lived in the wake of a public scandal, isolated from the world outside her window. This engraving of Guy's Hospital shows the world of John Keats. In 1816, he was an unknown medical student working within these rigid walls. His daily life was physical, governed by the hard reality of the surgical ward. Harriott met him while walking past the hospital's dripping stone arches. Keats was standing beneath a doorway, writing in a small notebook despite the rain. When she passed, he offered a bow. They began to walk together, finding a brief connection in a city that felt increasingly indifferent. This bond was precarious. Harriott was seeking a reprieve from the world of visionary writers. That world had already cost her so much. Keats offered a grounded, human presence. However, the same literary circles Harriott was hiding from were already beginning to take notice of the young surgeon. London society continued to scrutinize Harriott's past, forcing her to walk with her head lowered. Her only comfort became her private conversations with Keats along the Thames. Away from the judgmental eyes of the city, they found a quiet, shared understanding. These surgical saws and blades illustrate the visceral nature of Keats's training. He spent his days working with bone, tissue, and blood. He possessed a direct physical connection to human suffering and the mechanics of survival. This presence extended to Harriott's children. Keats spent afternoons in her garden, letting Harriott's infant son grasp his fingers. While Percy Shelley's mind had always been occupied by abstract philosophy and distant revolutions, Keats remained focused on the people right in front of him. They found a strange bond in their shared birth year, 1795. Keats had heard of a system called the Chinese zodiac, an astrological cycle that assigns an animal to each year, which identified them both as rabbits. They saw themselves as gentle creatures trying to survive a year of predators and storms. Their relationship was built on this tangible, physical present. But as Keats began to look toward the world of poetic ideals, that foundation started to shift. For Harriott, any move away from the grounded reality of the surgeon was a move back toward the world that had abandoned her. By late summer, Keats began frequenting the smoky rooms of the Leigh Hunt Circle. Here, young writers gathered to debate art, liberty, and the power of imagination. The quiet of the hospital was replaced by the intense energy of London's literary underground. Percy Shelley was a magnetic presence at these gatherings. He spoke with a fire that captivated the room, arguing that poetry was the highest form of truth and the ultimate tool for changing the fabric of society. Harriott watched as the language of medical science faded from Keats's conversation. He spoke more and more of the supremacy of poetry, echoing the very ideals that had defined her husband's life. Keats became obsessed with a concept he called negative capability. Negative capability is the state in which a person is capable of being in uncertainties and mysteries without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. Harriott saw history repeating itself. The surgeon she loved was being pulled into the same world of abstract ambition that had left her isolated and disgraced. The safety she found in his grounded reality was evaporating. As the weather turned cold, Harriott discovered she was pregnant. To protect their secret, she began using the alias Mrs. H, presenting herself as a widow to anyone who asked. She knew how quickly society used scandal to destroy a person's future. By hiding behind a false name, she ensured that her own history would not touch Keats's emerging reputation as he prepared to enter the literary world. Their final meeting took place in the November fog along the Thames. Keats pleaded for 1 month to prove he could live by his words and leave medicine behind forever. Harriott challenged him to do it, knowing it would be their last encounter. This is the dark expanse of the Serpentine in Hyde Park. In December, Harriott walked into these freezing waters, ending her life and the life of their unborn child. She had lived and died as Mrs. H, an invisible woman. In her final act, she ensured the scandal of the Shelleys died with her, leaving Keats unburdened as he began his pursuit of a life in poetry. Keats spent weeks searching for Harriott through the winter streets, asking for a woman he only knew by a borrowed name. The search ended at the magistrate's office, with the report of a pregnant woman's body discovered in the river. Some weeks later, Keats read Percy Shelley's poem, Alistair. The poem describes a poet who wanders the world in search of an ideal beauty, only to lose the living people around him. In the wake of Harriott's death, Keats saw the human cost hidden behind the pursuit of artistic perfection. He found he could no longer return to the surgical ward. The smell of the hospital and the cold instruments had become unbearable. The physical reality he had once mastered was now a source of overwhelming grief. Keats put down the scalpel and took up the pen. He began to process the weight of his loss by forcing it into the structured language of his verse. Grief was translated into the rhythm of his lines. This draft shows Keats' physical ink strokes. The unusual sorrow in his famous odes grew from the memory of the drowned child and the freezing rain of 1816. These lines preserved the woman he lost, becoming a container for grief with nowhere else to go. History remembers John Keats for the beauty of his art, but that beauty was the literal alchemy of grief, a monument to an invisible woman, an unborn child, and a reign that never ended.